How's everyone going? Good? Those of you who were here last week, did you enjoy stuff?
Yeah.
Surprisingly?
Yeah.
Never surprised.
It's funny how you can hear information but not really hear it, isn't it? Yeah. So I thought today what we would do is continue our discussion from last week. So last week we were talking, remember, about the human and how the human is made and designed. And we also talked last week, remember, about the principles of truth and how to discover truth. And that was a very interesting conversation, wasn't it? Because most people do not use the methods to discover truth. So I'd probably like to just do a little bit of revision about the principles of discovering truth. So do you remember what we said were the principles about truth in terms of discovering it and coming to know it? No one can remember anything. Sandra, and we go across to
that our brain or our mind is only a tiny parcel of the whole thing.
Yeah, remember there were methods of discovering truth, weren't there? And there were certain types of truth, which we'll talk about in a minute, but when we talk about the methods, most people use their intellect, don't they? So like most people are governed by intellectual, the domination of the intellect, and governed by intellectual assessment. But remember we talked about all the, sorry, I'll write that down. Remember we talked about all of the shortcomings of that. Can you remember what they were? The shortcomings of discovering things through your intellect? Okay. So, Gary, next one.
There's no emotion involved.
No emotion involved, but even more importantly, we come down to Lily.
False beliefs.
True, but more importantly, Sandra.
There's no senses involved.
There's no senses involved. So remember, a lot of the ways you were actually learning are through your senses, aren't they? So through your senses of taste, touch, of sight, your hearing, and all those kind of things. Can we have those phones off? Or in mute, silence them. Yeah, so the senses were a very, very important part. So as Gary also mentioned, the emotions are an important part. And in fact, the emotions are the brain of your soul, whereas your intellect is the spirit body's brain using the intellect. So naturally, the intellect, which many of you have been using to assimilate truth, is not a very effective tool to assimilate truth. And this is why when the intellect only is used, the average person doesn't actually practice truth. They just go back and revert back to their addictions. And their addictions are basically based upon their senses interacting with their emotions. So if you think about what your addictions are, you've got your senses, so your taste, touch, and all those kind of senses, and also your sexual feelings, all interacting with how you feel emotionally, and they drive your addictions. In other words, you could say these things drive your loves. And if we call your addictions your corrupted loves, you can see that your senses and your emotion really drive that. But it's also the main way you're learning. You're learning, for example, when people feed your addictions, you're learning through the combination of your senses being satisfied and your emotions being satisfied. And so now you're very, very desirous of having these things satisfied again. Right? So that drives you. And your intellect can scream at you and go, that's a bad idea, but your intellect has very little part to play in what you then decide to do, because your addictions and your emotions, or you could say your loves, your passions and your desires, and your emotions are what are going to drive you in terms of what you do in your life. But interestingly enough, they also drive a lot of how you learn. So that's also an interesting fact of life. So a lot of the ways we actually learn truths are not to do with what is logically presented to you, but rather it's what is sensorily and emotionally presented to you, right? So what might appear to be logic to the intellect quite often is completely illogical from a sensory or emotional perspective. An example of that is, let's say you get trapped and your arm's trapped, right? The logical thing to do might be to cut it off. Your arm, I mean. And in order to get out of the trap, if that's the only way out. But your senses and your emotions are going to want you to resist that. And you can see why, because you might die from cutting your arm off, right? You might bleed to death and so forth. So your logic and your senses are often in disagreement to each other, right? And this is very much the case with regard to everything you do. Your logic and your senses are frequently in complete disagreement with each other. So when it comes to the discovery of truth, senses and our emotions are an important part. But also you could say, in amongst all of these things, there's also the other very important thing, which is your experiences, aren't they? So, you know, a lot of people laugh at me when I talk about all sorts of matters about, you know, spiritual matters, what I know to be spiritual truths. They laugh at me and they say, oh, that's just not possible, you can't really do that, it's impossible for those things to happen. And I go, well, my personal experience is that it's happened, so I know it's happened. So no matter how much you're saying to me it's impossible, I know it's happened. So how can I be convinced otherwise once I've gone through the experience? It's like if you have the experience of tasting a mango, then you've had the experience, right? And somebody could say to you, there's no such thing as a mango, who knows what it is? And you go, of course there is, I've had one, right? So having the experience is a great part of determining truth, right? To actually resolve truth. And this is what the majority of people deny through their intellect. They basically say, in their logic, they say something is not possible. So they use their logic, they use their intellect in their nice, clever way of thinking, in their, you could say, in their pride and their arrogance, they say that's not possible. So the logic is telling them that it's not possible. Their logic, I must say, is telling them, not God's, because, you know, in amongst an infinite universe, there's a lot of things that are possible, right? But the intelligence is saying it's not possible. So now they're trying to say to people who have had experiences and senses, emotions about it being possible, they're trying to say to them that it's not possible. Now, that's not a very logical thing to do, actually, if you think about it. It's not logical to say to a person who swears to you they've had an experience, to say, I don't think you really have, right? Because if you have not had that experience, how would you know whether they've had it or not? Right? Now, there might be explanations to their experience that they have then deduced incorrectly from their experience, and that is certainly possible. So you can have an experience. So an example of that is many people have the experience of all of a sudden they have a feeling for a person, and then that person a few minutes later phones them. And they go, oh, that was amazing. But they don't think what might have caused that experience. So it could be all sorts of things. You know, it could be spirits who they can't see, influencing them to think about the person, or the feeling of the thoughts from the person coming at them. You know, every time a person thinks about you, there's a thought package actually that exits them, and you have the potential to receive it if you're open to such a potential. But the average person doesn't believe all that's true, of course. So they just go, oh, it was just strange. There's no, you know, the average person will not then go in a logical, you know, down a logical process, if you like, to determine the truth of that thing, right? So this is the problem with the determination of truth. So this morning, or this afternoon it is now, isn't it? I wanted to focus on reminding you how truth is determined. Truth is determined primarily from the mixture of experience, emotion and senses all being retained and assessed logically eventually. And unfortunately, the logic of the assessment is often tainted by all your emotions and all your beliefs and everything else. And so what you believe is a logical conclusion from the results of a certain thing may not be logic at all. Right? Another example of that is reincarnation. Right? There's 20 or 30 signs that the average person who has learned about reincarnation says these are the proofs of reincarnation. But they could also be the proofs of spirit obsession. Right? But they don't want to believe in that because that's too emotionally difficult to accept that you're actually possessed or obsessed by somebody else and that person is with you all the time. So the average person doesn't want to accept that, and so they'd prefer to then accept the idea that they've come back again. So that's an example of having an experience that is true, but incorrectly, logically assessing it, and then making an assumption of the truth from it. Do you understand the difference? So frequently when we have experiences, emotions, using our senses, we are then, unfortunately, our mind starts making these things. Now, assumptions or presumptions are very dangerous to you. There's a difference between assumptions and options. Options are, it could be this, it could be that, it could be this, it could be that, and I have no emotional impediment to thinking it might be any of those things. That's an option. An assumption is I have an emotional impediment to thinking it's that, that, and that, so I'm going to assume it's that. I'm going to assume it's the thing I want to assume. That's a presumption or an assumption, and they are very antagonistic to you discovering truth. Does that make sense to you? So when we talk about the truth about the human soul and how it works, and we talk about truth about life and the truth about God's laws, you might have had experiences with those particular things, but you've got to be very careful about making presumptions or assumptions about those things without full amount of evidence or further investigation. And the further investigation requires experiences, emotions and senses. It's not going to be just a further intellectual investigation. So it's not going to be just like, oh, look it up on the internet type investigation. Because that's next to useless, right? To you, determining truth is next to useless. You need to go through the experience. As many of you have now learned, you look up all sorts of things on the internet, but a lot of it's not even real, right? And you've learned that now. A lot of it can be just a creation of a machine nowadays, where it's not even real, right? So making a presumption or assumption about what is real when you don't really know and you've only had an experience, well, the experiences can be, you could say, they can be remembered and added together, but you need to make sure that you're looking at all the options before you come to a conclusion about what is true. Now, once you've had an experience, of course, many of the options start going out of the window, don't they? Because once you've done it and you know and you've actually gone through the experience, then all of the ideas you had about what it might be and all of the possibilities it could be, they are all pretty much disappearing now because you've gone through an actual experience that has told you a truth. All right, so now you can be a lot more certain once you've had an experience. Now this principle applies to all of God's truths. All of God's truths, all of the truths of the universe are dependent upon you having an experience of them. If you have not had an experience of them, then you don't know them for certain. It's as simple as that. Certainty only comes through, firstly, assessing things, having senses and emotions and assessment, and coming through the assessment and then looking at all the options and then having, you could say, experiments. And it's really funny in a way, isn't it, that experience and experiments. It's like experiencements. Like have an experiment, having a new experience, another one, and just see what that brings you is going to be a good way of actually learning truth, right? So going through experiments. And this is a great way of determining truth. In fact, from my perspective, that's all of the things I've done in the last 2,000 years have been based upon that fundamental principle. That I look at what I've already learned, then I create a whole series of new experiments, and then have an outcome from those experiments, and then I have experiences, and those experiences from those experiments then validate to me whether something is true or not. Now, these things, in order to be true, also have to have this component in them. They must also be loving. Everything that is unloving is a temporary creation in the universe. It's a temporary thing created by humans in the universe. The humans are the only really unloving creature, and anything that happens around them that is unloving is the direct creation of the humans that are also unloving. And this includes even how animals interact with each other. Anything that you perceive as unloving in the way animals interact with each other are all created by the human soul's intentions. So it's all still created by the humans. It's the animals interacting with the human's intention that creates such things. So, but again, if you're just making assumptions and you haven't experimented with that, you wouldn't know that, would you? You'd think the animals are sort of autonomous without your involvement, without your influence. But that's not true. Yeah, and through experiments, you can come to know the truth of that as well, like through what you do with animals. So every method of determining truth also has to have this love component in it. If there is no love component in it, you can automatically dismiss it as true. And this is a very powerful thing to remember. If you can automatically dismiss something, you don't have to go through further assessment or experiments. You can just dismiss it if you know it to be out of hand, unloving, right? However, it is not your definition of loving. Mm-hmm. So that's the thing to bear in mind. It's God's definition of loving, God's measure, not yours. So, don't make the assumption that because you believe it's unloving, that from God's perspective it's unloving. An example of that is when somebody feeds your addictions, most of you believe that is loving. God knows that is unloving. He sees the damage to your soul. He sees the sin it creates. He sees the flow-on effects of those sins every time you meet an addiction. But the average person on earth goes, no, that's what love is. Me getting my loves, the things I love, and primarily my senses and emotions has driven that. And it's getting those things met. And when somebody decides to meet them voluntarily for me, then it means they loved me. Right? So don't presume that. So it's very important to understand that this is the way God loves determines the truth of a matter or not. And if you're connected to God, obviously you're more and more in tune with the way God loves. And if you're more in tune with the way God loves now, you can also assess truth more rapidly. And this is very beneficial for your future. If you can bear that in mind, that if you're in alignment with God and the way God loves, now when it comes to determining further truths, it's going to be easier for you to do such a thing than it is for anybody who's just trying to use their mind to determine a truth. Because the mind itself, throw that away, the mind itself is just the intellect, and that itself is no good even for determining physical truths, let alone all the truths of the universe. You need these things involved to determine a truth, and these are by far the greatest things. The senses, the emotions, and the experience are by far the greatest things that determine the truth of the thing. But if you bear in mind that those things have to be in alignment with love in order for truth to be present. And not in alignment with your love, the way you think you should be loved or the way you think you should love, but the way God defines love to be. Right? So, very important to factor in your assessment of truth, the idea that not only are my senses and my emotions and my experience they are the most definite things that would cause me to recognise truths, but when those things are in alignment with God's love, now I know for certain they must be true, even if I've yet to have an experience. So this is how you can develop faith in future experiences. So once I became at one with God, the way I determined that a union of the soulmate must be possible is because I saw that it was in alignment with the love that I'd already received from God. So then it became a matter of determining how to do that, and that took me 2,000 years to work out. Right? When I say 2,000 years, that's 2,028 years take away around 32 years to work that out. So it took me a long time to work out how to achieve that, how to actually go through the experience. But I knew way, way back in the first century that was possible. Does that make sense? But it took so long to get to that point because of all the things I had to learn, and not only myself, but also all the things Mary had to learn in order for that to occur. We had to learn a lot of things. And then you could share those things using your intellect with others, but that's not good enough for them. They were going to have to also do exactly the same, and they would have to use their senses and their emotions and eventually have experiences that would cause them to go through the same thing. Does that make sense? So somebody can share a truth with you and you can think you know it, but you really don't. You really don't. It's not until you go through the actual experience that you really know it. So I thought I knew it was possible that this soulmate union could occur, but I didn't know how to achieve it at all. Right? So I knew it was possible because it was in alignment with the love and in alignment with my senses and in alignment with my emotions and in alignment with my experience, particularly once I met Mary, more in alignment with my experience. So I knew it was possible, but I just didn't know how to achieve it. And to do that, I had to have experiments. I had to go through experiments to learn how to do that. And any assumption that I made was an enemy of my experiments. You understand? So every presumption you make is an enemy of your desire for more truth. Because it fundamentally prevents a lot of things. When you make an assumption or a presumption, you're thinking one thing and you're neglecting the possibility of all the other things. And so it's an enemy of you actually finding out the truth. Does that make sense to you? So this is why when you do things that are presumptuous or based on pride or based on arrogance or based on a lack of humility, based on the fact that you have not admitted to yourself that you don't know a thing, when you do that, you're actually constraining your future, you're limiting your potential growth for the future. That make sense? Okay. Is there any questions? Is anybody hot for a start? Everyone's good? Okay. Is there any questions you have about that? So, Chief?
So you just would touch on at the end there, like this quality, because I notice in you this quality of like, I think it's humility, isn't it? Where if there's something that you don't know, you are kind of looking to be disproven on your assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Always.
Whereas what I see for the rest of us is we're always making assumptions. Like we have an experience and we're kind of like making an assumption almost automatically, like based on our like what we want it to mean, sort of thing?
Yes, most of the time based on what you want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so is it about developing the quality of humility, or assuming that we're arrogant on every...
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of reasons why you might want something to be a certain thing that you already believe or think. And most of it is because you're not prepared to go through an emotion of being wrong on the matter for whatever reason. So an example of that is most of you don't want to accept that your parents never loved you, right? So why is that? Because there's a whole lot of grief associated with accepting that somebody doesn't love you. And when you don't want to go through the grief, you're trying to prevent an emotion. Once you prevent an emotion, what's happening in the methods of finding truth? So for this methods to find truth up here, and if I am now cutting off my emotion, so now I've crossed that out and said I'm not using that, what's happening? Now one of the methods that I've got for determining a truth has gone. Now I'm hamstringing myself, as the saying would be. So if you think of what happens when you're hamstrung, you can't walk. So you fundamentally, a fundamental bodily function is now not possible for you. So as soon as you take out the emotion, a fundamental way of determining truth is gone now. You've now, and the way we take out our emotions is by not wanting to experience them. So when it comes to the determination of many things that we think are true, most of us want them to be true. And why do we want that to be true? Well, most of the time it's because we don't want to feel our feelings when it's false, when it's actually wrong. We don't want to feel those feelings, right? So, and because of that, we're basically fundamentally shutting down our emotion. So now it's going to be very hard for us to determine what the truth is now. And also not only hard, but also we will not have a desire to do it, which is even worse. So it's not only now hard to find the truth, but now we don't even have a desire to even find it anymore. That's once you get to that stage, you're now constraining change, you're now constraining growth, you're now, there's so many things that happen as a result of that. So for me, when a thought comes to my mind about any truth, the very first thing I'm doing is trying to test it. I'm coming up with experiments of trying to test it. I'm not automatically presuming that it's right. I always go through a period of experimentation, right? And the reason why I do is because if I don't do that, then fundamentally I'm making a decision based upon the fact that I'm also constraining my faculties. These are, you could call them faculties that we use to determine truths. And what I'm doing is I'm shutting down some faculties, still hoping to find out the truth, right? And I see this happens to many of you all the time. Even on a day-to-day basis, when we're doing things like research and other things like that, where you're researching something, you get to a point where you're tired or you're exhausted by the search, and you just give up and you go, oh, I'm just going to do it the easiest way I know how.
This must be the truth, this one that I just found.
Well, it might not be. You might even know that it's not the full possibility, but you just think the full possibility, finding out that's too hard now. I've got to go through grief and other emotions and frustration and anger and all these other emotions. I don't want to do that, so I just want to do what's easy now, right? And this is very dangerous to your future if you keep doing this, yeah? And so it's very important to understand these fundamental principles about what are you shutting down? Are you shutting down your senses? Well, I see many of you do that with food. So in other words, you go, oh, it doesn't taste very good, but it's good for me. And you put it down, I go, it doesn't taste very good. That probably means it's probably not good for you. Do you know what I mean? Like, you think about all the foods that taste pretty good, they're all pretty good for you. You think, I mean natural foods, not the ones humans create. And then you think about all the natural foods that are bitter and terribly sour. It's like with a lemon, like a little dose of it's not too bad, is it? Because it's quite zingy, and whatever. But imagine drinking a whole glass of it. It's like, whoa! It's like drinking a glass of acid. How much is your body? It's meant to be flavouring things, not to be taken in these huge amounts. And your body's going to get, you just drank a glass of acid, so what's going to happen to your body? Like, of course it's going to have a reaction, And then some people go, oh, but I really like the idea of oil and lemon, and you mix them together and you scallop, you know, and it comes out your bowel or whatever. And I'm going, well, sure, it certainly does clean out your bowel. You know, I've tried it. It certainly does. And is it good for you? You know, like having all that, you know, oil go through your liver and, you know, it's just, you know, and how hard is it even to make oil? Like, you have to have all sorts of devices even to make it. So you should be having little bits of it, not large amounts, and you should have it in a more natural environment, like eat it with the nuts, you know, eat raw nuts and then you have some oil, but not just pouring oil and eating it, you know, like that. You know, it's not very logical. But the average person goes, but it's good for me. So what they do is they shut down a sense. The sense of taste is shut down, the sense of smell is shut down, the sense, you know, the sickness they feel you know, afterwards. That feeling they have, that's all shut down, but it's good for me, And of course I'm going, well, probably not. It's pretty logical that it's probably not. If you just use your senses on that one, you can pretty much determine the truth, right? Now I'm not saying lemon is bad for you, I'm just saying small drops. You know, not like lemon after lemon every day. And eating one is a bit better than drinking, because you know that's like cutting up 5 lemons and, you know, getting all the juice out of it. You know, who would ever eat 5 lemons in a row, like, and want to? Like, only crazy people, only people who have lost their senses. Right? So this tells you that you know, these these fads, of course, are not good for you, right? Now, let's say I've got a bad bowel. Well, why have I got one? If I need to drink lemon and oil in order to cure my bad bowel, then maybe I need to be looking more seriously at what I eat day to day, rather than just eating what I want day to day to a point where I get my bowel in such a state that it hardly functions, and then I have a whole lot of intense stuff going into it to clear it out, and then I'm ready to go again with all the bad stuff. You know, that's the general action most people take, right? But it's, again, not logical. So this is what I see everybody doing. There's emotions that are determining to a large degree what a person chooses to do, even with their experiences, and what they accept as truth. For me, I know I have emotions, right? I have emotions about everything, like you guys do, right? But I don't believe they're all real. I don't assume that I need them to be satisfied. What I do is I'm still looking at everything from a sensory, emotional experience and intellectual point of view, not just using one tool, such as my addictions, to find a truth, which would never, by the way, happen. You'll never find truths through your addictions, except you'll find the true things that are not true through your addictions, generally speaking. So you can discount a lot of error through your addictions, but you'll never find what the truth is through your addictions, right? But this is the thing the average person needs to do, I feel, is to have a very, very open heart, very open mind. It doesn't matter what you feel about a truth. Is it true or not? That's the real question. It doesn't matter that you're angry about it. It doesn't matter that you're sad about it. It doesn't matter that you feel ashamed because of it. It doesn't matter. None of those things matter. What matters is, are they true? Period. That's it. Are they true? And then if they are, it will be loving for you to do something about that truth in every instance. It'll be loving. It's going to be, you know, it's going to help your life doing something in harmony with it. Does that make sense? When you come in this approach that many people have of going, but I like the idea of that. I like that idea. Like many of you, when we talk about soulmates, you like the idea they're going to rescue you from your life, right? Don't you? You like knight in shining armour type soulmate, you know, that kind of thing, right? Some of your soulmates are in jail. Are they going to rescue you? Some of your soulmates have passed already. Are they going to rescue you? Something like, you know, like, do you want to find out the truth or not? And the only reason why we don't want to, oftentimes, is because we have emotions that we don't want to feel that are involved in that process, and senses we don't want to experience in that process, right? So our logic then goes, oh, but that can't be true. Oh, that can't be true because I don't want to feel it. It can't be true.
And we're quite slippery as well. Like I look at that list: intellect, senses, emotions. You can have all of those things, but kind of tell yourself that it means
something else,
something completely different. That's not
yeah,
true.
we can make these assumptions.
Yeah.
That then go, oh, all of those things add up to this. It's like 1 + 1 + 1. It's meant to equal 3, right? But for us it equals 28. Because we've just come up with all these presumptions. And fundamentally we're not being mathematical in our presentation of truth. And remember last week we said the truth is always mathematical. It is always scientific. So there is always a chain of events you can follow. So you have a disease, there's a chain of events you can follow, and it always will get back to an emotion that you're in denial of. If you have an accident, there's a chain of events that will follow, and you'll always get back to an emotion you were denying. If there's a breakup in a relationship, there's a chain of events that occur that are all mathematical in the relationships, all about love, all about truth. And if you had chosen differently in harmony with the love and truth, probably that relationship wouldn't have broken up, or if it did break up, it would have been in harmony with the love and truth as to the reason why it broke up, right? Rather than something that you're pining for afterwards. All of these things are true when it comes to determining truths. And so when we are making these presumptions, assumptions, many of you are doing it on a daily basis. I notice that happening all the time. And then you also get to a place of what I would classify as emotional saturation. Do you know what I mean by that? Like you hear things or you investigate things to the point where you're now saturated emotionally and you can't handle anymore. Right? And that's because you're not handling your emotions. You're not going through the feeling of it. So you just feel like, I can't handle this anymore. I'm out of here. Right? That place of emotional saturation is the avoidance of truth. You're avoiding truth now in that place. As soon as you allow a saturation of any of the senses to the point where you're not processing it anymore, in other words, you're not humble to the processing of what's going on sensorially or emotionally, once you get to that point, you are now in denial of truth as well. That's automatic. Yeah? This is a slow way, because now the law must beat you into submission in order for you to find the truth. And it's not going to be something that you are voluntarily doing anymore. Right? A child voluntarily enters experiences without worrying about whether it's going to cry from the experience or experience pain from the experience. So that when the child starts to learn how to walk, it's not going, oh, I'm really worried. Because if I learn how to walk, I might fall over. And imagine if the child did that. I don't know how to walk. It looks pretty dangerous to me. 2 legs. Should be 4, probably. More stable that way. Imagine if it could do that. Right? Rather than feeling, I want like fast mobility, which is a feeling the child in a harmony with love the child's actually having. If it was doing all these other things, and it would only be a parent teaching it to do this, of course, and doing all these other things in its assessment, would it ever learn to walk? Can you see if it was just constantly afraid and worried about how many accidents it could have? Imagine walking downstairs. It's like, whoa. That's very dangerous. You now got 1 leg on it. At any one point in time, you've got 1 leg balancing you. That's the child looking at that logically. That doesn't. You should be going down on all 4s. I don't know how that would look, mind you. Or better still, going down on your bottom or something. So it's all very stable, all very slow, of course, right? So you can see the limitations that come from you not wanting to experience something. It's exactly the same for adults. What we do as adults is we're frequently denying even the choice of experiences, because we're worried about what the outcome will be. Like, so many of you have denied the choice to be yourselves because you're worried about what the outcome's going to be. You're worried that people will see your sins, your errors. You're worried that they'll make you feel ashamed and make you feel guilty. And you're worried that they're going to punish you and treat you badly. But these are not what a child, none of that is what a child would do. And so you can see there's huge restrictions to learning now based upon all those worries, right? And this is a problem for truth. This creates a problem with your investigation of truth. You've got to have experiences. Many of you are restricting experiences because of money. Like just that one thing, money, is restricting you from having experiences. That's like a paper thing, or now it's plastic, right? A plastic thing that's been created by humans is now restricting your experience, right? Where you won't face up to truths because they cost too much money. Or you won't face up to truths that would cost you less money, right? Because you're in this zone of worried about the money. The money's attached to your worth, and the money's attached to your emotions now. And because it's all attached to you, your decision making is terrible when it comes to it. Does that make sense? Same problem. Same problem where, again, we're not utilising all the methods to find truth. Right? So very important to understand from a really heartfelt position this idea.
Is this what you mean? This is sincere ignorance? Is it that you've been talking about this?
That's right. Remember, I think it was in Canada I started first talking a few years ago about what it means to be sincerely ignorant. And the average person isn't. That the average person comes into every single thing with their history that they think has something pertaining to this new thing they're learning, and it doesn't. And so it's like when we start talking about God. Everybody has their own opinions about what that is. Everybody. When I first started talking to many of you as a group about God, some of you were even present at way back in the early days when I talked about God. All I used to feel from audience is, oh no, now we're going down religion again, are we? That kind of feeling. And I'm going, what's it got to do with religion? Right? That's in your emotion. And that's restricting you now from learning the truth about God just because you have an emotion about religion. And that's a silly thing to do. Because God's the creator of the whole universe and God knows everything. It would be very wise to talk to God eventually and to get to know God eventually and to learn from God eventually. It would be the most wise thing for you to do of all of the wise things you could do. Because God's the source of all information. And yet the average person has already cut that off because of one emotion. Can you see it doesn't make any sense? And this is where our logic goes, oh, there is no God. And I'm going, huh? That's not logical. All your senses, all your experience, all your emotions all teach you about design and everything, and yet you're saying there's no designer. That doesn't make any logical sense, right? But when we have an emotion attached, like a religious history, or our parents treated us a certain way based upon their religious beliefs or whatever, now we have great impediments towards discovering the truth, even about God. So even like 2 weeks ago when we had that discussion at Mergen about God, I couldn't even have that discussion with most of you 10 or 15 years ago. Because there's so many emotions that had to go first, so many beliefs that had to go first before you can even have an open discussion about God. And yet God is probably, if I was talking with a bunch of children, God would be the very first thing I started talking about. Makes sense? But because of the impediments to our methods of finding truth as adults that we've imbibed over years and years of experience, the very thing that would benefit us the most, is now not possible for us because of all the impediments. And so then we've got to go through teaching a whole heap of other things to get to the point where we can teach the basic thing. Does that make sense? And that is what the danger is of how those emotions then make assumptions and cause us to drive, and our desire to avoid emotion drives us to that place. So when I'm presented with truths, or I'm presented with ideas, I'm not thinking, oh, that's not my idea, so it's a bad one. Right? Oh, that idea is going to make me cry, so I can't listen to that. I'm not thinking, oh, I'm going to be afraid if I thought about that, so I can't have that. I'm not thinking any of those things, because all of those things are impediments to finding out whether the thing being presented is actually true or not. Right? If you're prepared to go through all your emotions and prepared to go through all your sensory experiences, prepared to have whatever thoughts come into your mind and analyse them and work through them, prepared to go through and experience and make experiments, why would you be even worried about any new thing coming at you at any time? You wouldn't. You'd be soaking information up as fast as you possibly could. Right? So many of you know, those of you who deal with me on a daily basis know that I soak up information very, very rapidly, right? And the main reason why I do is because I don't have any emotional impediments to doing it. Make sense? It's got nothing to do with how clever I am or anything like that. It's just got everything to do with the fact of you get rid of your restrictions, now everything becomes rapid. Yeah, you understand? Everything you assimilate becomes rapid. So many times I'm talking to an engineer and they think I'm not getting something, but I often know I've often thought way beyond where they are with it, even though I'm not an engineer. Because I've assimilated a whole heap of information that they have emotional impediments to assimilating. Does that make sense? And while those emotional impediments exist, you are not going to find truths. While the impediments to your senses exist, you're not going to find truth. While the impediments to making experiments and failing exists, you are not going to find truths. The purpose of experiments is to find out whether they fail or succeed. You will never be able to build an experiment that only succeeds all the time. And then the next one only succeeds, and the next one only succeeds. You're only going to do that if somebody else comes along before you and they've done the ones that failed. Do you understand? Because in any experimentation of any subject, you are going to need to go through experiment after experiment after experiment in order to find out what is true. And many of those experiments, in fact, all of those experiments will fail until you find out what the truth is. And if you're not prepared emotionally to do that, then you're not going to discover truths. I was prepared emotionally to do that. Make sense? Yeah. So very important to understand this part of it, because when we come to talking about the universe and where you fit into it and what happens to the human soul and what's going on with regard to your life and why those things are happening in your life, all of those things have truths associated with them, and you can find out what those truths are. Right? They're all open book to you. God has made, like the universe, isn't it mystery? God isn't making mystery. God's saying, I've made this very, very clever universe that's very, very large. It's not infinite, but it's very, very large. God's the infinite. God created the very large universe. You can learn a lot about it. In fact, there's so many things you can learn about it. As you learn, you'll approach you start to understand what it means to be infinite, like even in that process of discovery. And God said it's all an open book, but you've got to have the foundational understandings in order to determine what those truths are. And this is the foundational understanding of how to do it. And it's something that most of you have not understood. And this is why you feel oftentimes like you're floundering around, like not understanding, doubting, criticising ideas, concepts, thinking you already know them when you don't because you haven't had experience. You know what I mean? And in that place, truth becomes a very hard thing to obtain. And this is why, if you look at the attitude on earth right now, the attitude fundamentally is there is no truth. There is no absolute truth. That's what the average person on earth believes. And it is completely false to believe that. Huh? Isabella? You just need to flick that mic switch in.
Is it then also the problem because we want control that we don't experience?
Yes, and what do you want control of? Mostly it's your emotion, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you want to be, what you believe is sort of stable, psychologically stable is the general goal of most humans, while they're living on Earth in particular. Psychological stability is for a person who's denying their emotions and denying their senses, psychological stability is not there. There's no psychological stability. You've even got complete logic instability in that place. Right? So this is why the whole world's nuts. Because there's no stability. There's nothing present that can cause stability when you're in denial of so many senses and so many emotions. There's nothing present that can make you stable. You understand? So the average person on Earth is aiming for some kind of stability in their life. They want their relationship to not change. They want their friends to not change. They want their life to be stable. They want it to be good enough, not bad. Not go through bad periods of time. Ironically, oftentimes it's the bad periods of time when you learn the most. But the average person doesn't want that. So they don't want to have any bad experience. They want everything to be within their paradigm or their belief system regarding what the limits are, positive and negative limits are. They want not too happy, not too sad. Can't have bliss because everyone will criticise you, and you can't have rage because everybody will criticise you for that too. So you've got to live in this sort of quasi place that you've created, and fundamentally doing that, you're an idiot. But not only are you an idiot, you're psychologically disturbed.
And also more unhappy.
Sorry?
Like also more unhappy.
Well, that's why you're psychologically disturbed. Because doing that is only going to make you unhappy, and then in your unhappiness you're going to do a whole lot of silly things because you're disturbed. So that person goes, I don't know why that bad thing happened in my life. It's because you're disturbed. And the main reason why we're disturbed is because we are not honouring the ways we determine truth. Right? So this affects every area of your life, like without any doubt. It's affected every area of mine. And using and understanding the methods to find truth is very, very important to you to understand. Of all the things to understand, the ways to experiment with truth and the methods in terms of determining what the truth is are some of the most important things for you to come to grasp at a soul level of all the things you could grasp. Well then.
Is that like, would you say, well, what I believe is listening to you, the most, stable condition is when you're a baby? Because they don't have intellect.
I would not say that.
Oh.
No. Emotionally, it's one of the most stable conditions, but
Yeah.
a seventh sphere spirit is way beyond the stability of the baby.
Yeah, but what I was referring to is like they use their senses, they have the emotion, they experiment all the time.
They do, but they don't have a developed intellect or a developed way to experience, and also a lot of their senses are undeveloped because they haven't used them yet.
Right.
So they have a cut down version that they're just assimilating as they grow. You've got to remember, for a child, in terms of the soul is there in its pristine state, the half of the soul connected to the half of the body, the bodies, the two bodies, the half of that sexual gender. The half of the soul is having an experience, but the way that it gets a lot of its experience is through the senses of the bodies. And when a baby is first born or first conceived, none of those senses are developed yet. So it's got to go through a period of growth first that is natural to the child in order to reach the point where those senses are developed enough in order to use them. So a child, for example, doesn't have a sense of sight well developed at the time of birth. It takes 6 to 12 months for the sense of sight to firm up and to become, to be able to recognise shapes, objects, and other things like that. And then, of course, it doesn't have a developed intellect to know what to name them. So it sees a cube and what does it call it? Unless it learns some language and other things, and that's the development of more senses. It's not going to know how to name things and then reflect upon what that thing is, the properties of that thing. So a circle has different properties to a cube. The child just sees a sphere and sees a cube, but doesn't even know what the properties of it are, and the investigation of its properties, and any of those things doesn't even appear to it. It's just experiencing them. So when the child's given a ball, it's not saying to itself, "Oh, there's a sphere," and that's very much like the sphere of the earth and other things in the universe. And the sphere doesn't have any single point on it, like it's not thinking all those things. It's just experiencing the sphere, throwing it, seeing it. Until it learns to develop other parts of its senses, it's never going to even conceive to examine the true nature of a sphere. It's mathematical. It's mathematics. It's ideas and concepts that are behind it. It won't recognise any of those things. It can't, because it doesn't have developed senses enough to do so.
So it's not even questioning, is it?
No.
Because it hasn't gone.
So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Is it's assimilating without the emotional baggage.
Yeah.
Unless the parents, of course, give it emotional baggage, which they often do. The child is assimilating without emotional baggage on it for the most part, particularly when it's very young, but it still hasn't it's not developed enough sensorily or intellectually to be able to determine the reality of such things. It needs all those things to determine truth.
Yeah. And when you said assumptions, could you equate assumptions with doubt and questioning with opinions? No.
Well, not really. Like if you look at the true word doubt, it just indicates a condition where you don't know whether it's right or wrong yet. And that's okay. You're allowed to not know whether something's right or wrong yet. When you have an emotional desire to have doubt, well, that's a very different state. A person in an emotional desire to have doubt doesn't want there to be a truth, because they might have to act upon the truth. And if they have to act upon the truth and it's too hard for them, or there's too many other emotions involved in acting on that truth, they'd rather doubt than they would come to a recognition of the truth.
Yeah, that's what I meant by assumptions. You've already got your decision made, whereas the doubt is also...
So they're not really assumptions anymore, are they, in a lot of ways? You've already made up your mind even though it's false. Yeah. Which is what the average person does do. Yeah, with a lot of things. And, even if you sometimes know it's false, you will still, like you've gone through an experience that proves to you it's false, many people still won't allow the error to become conscious to them, so they can live in the untruth. So an example of that, many of you do this with your emotions. Many of you drink things that are bad for you, eat things that are bad for you. You know they're bad for you, into here, but you haven't felt they're bad for you yet. Here. Yeah. And you haven't assimilated the truth that it is bad for you, here. So why do you want it here and not here? There's got to be reasons. You understand? And these are the kind of things that cause you to then make presumptions and assumptions, which are really driving your state of arrogance, saying, I don't really want to know what the truth is about that. And a very popular thing on earth now is to not want to know. What's going on in the world? I don't want to know. The average person would prefer not to know. Because once you know, what happens? You've got to hold that up, right?
You've got to make a decision.
You've got to make a decision.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to have to do. And you're probably going to have to take an action. And you're probably going to find from that action that it challenges somebody. And that somebody first might even be you. And so the average person goes, I don't want to do all that. So I'd rather not know.
Yeah, just remain ignorant, and then I don't have to do any of these things.
Yeah. So from God's perspective, most of us are in a state of preferred ignorance. And God's laws penalise preferred ignorance. So when you're mistakenly ignorant, or you've made a mistake, God's laws hardly penalise that at all, right? Particularly if it's a mistake driven by a good intention. And particularly when it comes to a mistake made in learning, like, where you've done an experiment and it failed. Right? From God's perspective, you did a great thing. You found out that failed. Right? So from God's perspective, when we fail with an experiment, we're good kids. Right? But most parents don't think that, of course, and so they taught us when we failed, we were bad kids. And so naturally we've got all these emotional impediments to then failing. And so for many of us, we're so emotionally restricted to failing that we don't do anything. But we need to fail in order to determine some truths. We need to have an experiment and it failed in order to find out some more truths. So it makes no logical sense what we're doing, but it does make a lot of emotional sense if you don't want to feel certain emotions.
Yeah, a lot of the failure and the fear of failure is the punishment and the humiliation that comes with it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So that's an example of an emotional impediment to learning.
Yeah, the addictions that we want to keep. Yeah.
So most women have high emotional impediments to learning mathematics. And the reason why is because they would have mostly instantly got the disapproval of their fathers if they did. Because fathers generally feel they're more logical than their mothers are. And it's the domain of the man, is what many fathers believe. And so when you're a girl growing up in that atmosphere and you become cleverer than your father when it comes to maths, he's not happy.
Yeah.
So you've got to be dumb in order to be accepted, right? So many of you don't realise, but the reason why maths are not appealing to you is because of your fathers or the attitudes that came from men, right? God wants all of you to understand the mathematics of everything. Because in the mathematics of everything is the truth of everything. So it's such a big thing to not know mathematics is a big thing. And to not be open to it is a big thing. Yeah. So very important to understand the impediments associated with what, the assimilation of truths. Yeah. Olga? We go to Olga. And to Nicholas.
How do you determine what kind of experiments have priority in your life? Because you can do 1,000 experiments.
Of course, a good question. And any experiment that is a focus on love or truth is a good experiment. Mm-hmm. So you always want to do them first. And any experiment associated with God or the human soul is a higher priority than any other experiment. So you want to do them first too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you look at the priority system we talked about last week, it was last week, wasn't it? The priority system, remember we talked about spiritual, emotional, sexual, physical. It makes sense then that the majority of our experiments should begin with the spiritual because they are the highest priority. They are the ones that are going to give us the maximum benefit in the longer term, right? They are the ones that are going to open you to assimilating truth in other areas as well. If you're shut down emotionally, you can't assimilate a truth. So I need to find the truth about my emotions. I need to find out, how do I feel emotions? How do emotions work? What are they like? What do they feel like? I need to find all that out so that I can open up emotionally, so that I can have a faster method of determining what the truth is, right?
And would you also, maybe that's a very intellectual question, but would you really sit down and write down, okay, this is my hypothesis and now I want to experiment and
yeah, certainly you can do
it?
that. Yeah. Certainly, that's better than not doing it at all.
Yeah. Certainly,
but it'd be better, how do I feel about it? How am I going to do this experiment involving my senses? So it's like, you can do something with fun or you can do it tediously, can't you? So what I like, see, an example is, my parents gave me a small rubber ball. I don't know, it's like one of those really bouncy balls. You remember that? And those, you don't see them much around now, but I'm sure they're still made. And you hit it and it just goes for miles. And so I loved it. I bought a big one, a small one. Eventually I ended up having to buy these things for myself. So I bought a big one, a small one, and I bought a number of different types. And I'd experiment with the angles about getting things back to me. So I'd throw a ball like in between, on your seat, and I'd go boom, 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 and come back to me. Back, and I've just learned about angles, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like learning about angles playing on a billiard table is more fun than learning about angles sitting down in a in a school chair, with somebody drawing angles on a board. Make sense?
Yeah.
And to also have the judgment of the angles in my soul. you know, the thing with the billy table, you get the feeling of, oh, I just got that in the hole, right? So there's the instant rewards from understanding at a soul level what the angles mean and where you hit a thing and what happens to those angles, right? So there's fun ways of learning something, and then there's terrible ways of learning something, right? So I think I'd want to design the fun ways, but there's fun ways of learning about your emotions, and there's terrible ways. You know, imagine sitting in a lecture theatre, like many of you have done this with me. You've sat in a lecture theatre for 4 hours and we talked about emotions, and how much fun was that? I'm having fun because I'm sure many of you are. The more you learn about emotions, the more frightened you become. So it's sort of like, that wasn't very much fun. You've got to come up with a way of making it a bit more fun when you do these experiments to learn the truth, right? So you experiment with rage and see what happens there, and experiment with kindness, and experiment with compassion, and experiment with these feelings in a real life situation. You'll learn far faster than somebody sitting in front of you lecturing to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's ways to learn that are fun, there's ways to learn that are quite difficult, and unfortunately on Earth we've chosen the more difficult ways to learn most things. You know, because we're afraid of making mistakes. So we'd rather sit in front of a person lecturing us about emotions for years on end, which you've done, right, without experimenting with any of my emotions. And so how much more knowledgeable about emotions now are you compared with with somebody who didn't do that? Well, you're not. You know, the reality is you're just as dumb about emotions as you started, except that you now have a whole intellectual concept of what you think they might be, which is now added to your concepts or your presumptions, which are now those presumptions are now preventing you from actually having more emotion. So it doesn't make any sense to do these things. So you've got to learn to go through the experience, you know. So this is very important when you make experiments. You make them because they're real life experiences. You know, you don't do it just because Jesus said I should make an experiment. So today my whole job is to make an experiment. Well, you know, make an experiment that's going to have an outcome if it succeeds. Like, it's the difference between going, okay, I'm just going to build I'm a bit worried about all the mathematics involved in building a house and making it square and everything. So what I'm going to do is I'll get a flat piece of thing there, and I'll get some matchsticks, and they'll be my wood, and then I'll glue them all together, and I'll make a house, and I'll look at the end and go, oh, I learnt some things there. And you might, right? You might do this if you're a child, but when you're an adult, you've got the ability to build an actual house. Why would you not start that and then see what goes wrong? And use that for learning. Do you understand?
Yeah.
And there might be an outcome once you're done.
I personally think I get way too complicated about experiments.
Yeah.
Especially since I started listening about divine truth.
Yeah, that makes no sense to me because I'm not complicated about it. No. So what happens for most people is their fear goes higher. They hear some truths, their fear goes higher, they don't deal with their fears, they emotionally shut down their fears. The net result's going to be, I do less rather than more. Yep. Yeah, and that's sad if you think about it, because that's not what should happen. What should happen is, once I learn the truth about how to do a thing, I should do more of it. But again, we got to use the word learning here very judiciously. You're only learning through experience and experiments and emotion and senses. When you think you're learning through your intellect, you are not learning. You are not learning. Ideas are coming at you with your intellect. That is true, but you're not learning them. You can only learn them by doing. So this is why I go, I see many of you have great ideas and you never put them into any action. And I go, what's going on there? It's like, you're never going to know whether it's a good idea or not. Right? It's only by putting something into action that you learn, oh, that made a mistake there, that wasn't very good. But because many of you have these deep emotional impediments about doing something wrong, you're unwilling to do something. So procrastination, which is what many of you are very good at, comes from the fact that you're afraid of making mistakes and you're afraid of the emotions involved when you make one. Right? My feeling is make as many mistakes as you possibly can and learn from them. That's what you want to do. That's what I've done. Yeah. This life as well as the prior one. Like, I didn't have an excavator at my disposal in the first century. It's funny when you get in one and you make mistakes with it. Like, you sort of learn how to use one and where it's best to be used, and also don't overload it when it's extended because you might tip the damn thing over and all sorts of things, right? You learn a lot of practical things about that and things that you didn't know before. Yeah? So this is very good. Everybody should do that. Imagine if we had no emotional impediments to learning and we learnt everything emotionally and sensorially. Can you imagine what school would be like? It'd be awesome, wouldn't it? You'd be getting up in the morning, you're half sick and half dead from the sickness of it. I'm going to school, and they'd have to tie you down and tie you to your bed to stop you from going to school, to stop harming other people, to let you know. You know, you'd be passionate the whole time about wanting to go, and you know, you'd be soaking up the information, not like, oh, here we go again, like, running all things down, you know. Every time I got to a new lesson, you know, particularly English, I hated English. and I go to and they'd say, oh, you had to read Macbeth or something, and I go, oh, do I have to learn? Now I want to, right? Because I like some Shakespeare now, but back then it was like, oh God, you know, there was no. The teachers weren't connected to the material and passionate themselves. They didn't create a way that was for learning that, because everything's about curriculum to a standard, whatever. They haven't created a way to learn that the child will naturally enjoy. And so you're there and you don't enjoy it. And naturally, when you don't enjoy something, you're probably not going to want to do it. Yeah. So how many of you enjoyed school?
Some
So maybe 10%. Of us, maybe 15%, right? You know, I love school, but I know that it's not normal. And I also know that if they made a lot more children, I would have loved a lot more. So when you design your own experiments and when you design your own life, you want to make sure that if things work out, there's an outcome from them, not just, oh, you did an experiment, there was no outcome, and therefore, you know, it didn't really benefit anybody, you know. You also got to do big. You got to go big, is my sort of idea about it as well. Mary knows that. It's like, you know, I wanted to know whether digging some holes on the property, whether they'd fill up with water and they'd retain water if I put some mulch in and everything. So I didn't dig one hole and just watch. I got an excavator and I dug 100 holes. Mary said, why are we digging all these holes? I got to know whether it works, and where it works, if it works. You know, I've got to do the experiment properly. You know? And that experiment didn't work very well. Many of you know we've got hundreds of holes out of our property. Some of you have fallen in those holes. And you can see that because of the way the matter decays and everything, and the way the water is only concentrated in one little area, it has had a bigger benefit to the larger landscape, right? When it came to terracing, it was the same. It's like, we want to do a terrace. I said, there's nowhere on our property I can do a big enough one. So that experiment we had to start at the function centre, because there wasn't and for that experiment we needed an excavator and a dozer. So, okay, hopefully they'll come along, you know, and soon enough somebody bought us an excavator and a dozer and off with that experiment, right? And when I say bought us, I use that term very loosely. It's bought God's way, an excavator and a dozer. And because they could see the plans that I'd made, right? And so, yeah, very first time we get the worst piece of land that we could find on the property, and we did a big terrace. Like, it was like 180, 200 metres long, 35 metres wide. I wanted to see if it worked. It worked. And it only worked because I'd made 5 other failures on our property of all different experiments. I I tried digging holes, that doesn't work as good as I wanted it to work. It did work, but not as good as I wanted it to. And then I thought, what I'll do is I'll dig a big trench, like all the way along the whole hill, and fill it up with matter. Like you see one of them over here, on the top of the hill over here. I dug a trench that was it was a swimming pool sized trench. And I filled it up with matter, like root to the brim, like overfilled it with matter. And then I watched what happened. And then over the years, I'd get in there with a shovel and dig down, and I'd notice, it's wet, and then dry. This isn't very good. Because in order for it to work, I need it all wet, or all moist at least. So so then I realised, of course that makes a lot of logical sense, because there's not enough water falling to get the whole thing wet. Like, duh. No. So make it not as deep. What happens then? Right? This is the experiment, another experiment. You just experiment. Once I found the right depth, which ironically is only about, not very deep at all, but also contained that depth so the water could be contained equally over that entire area. Now you get fantastic things happening, right? So that's what's happening at the Environment Centre now. You get trees growing that are now, 6 to 8 metres tall in a couple of years, and all this water stays there, and all this life comes in. And you walk through there now, and it's like a whole ecosystem of birds and animals and everything. This is what I was aiming for, right? But if I look at how much that experiment cost me, probably $200,000. And that's without the dozer and the excavator.
What I really love about this is that you didn't beat yourself up.
No. Well, I often come home to Mary and say, I'm a bit sick of failing. I tried again and I failed that one. I'm getting a bit sick of it. But then you just go, well, how are you going to learn? So I had to have my cries about failing sometimes. Yeah. Important to understand that with life.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Ivana, and then so Nicholas was first, and then come down to Ivana.
Yeah, maybe a simple question, but what's the difference between learning method to find truth on earth and learning method in the spiritual world?
None at all, Nicholas.
None at all.
No. And this is the beauty of all the truths that you'll learn when you've discovered a real truth about a thing. If it's the real truth, it will benefit you now and in the spirit world. It won't be like you get to spirit world and you have to start again. It won't be like that. It'll be, I already learned how to do that when I was on earth. Make sense? So there's no such thing as learning something on earth that's a good thing, that's in harmony with God's truth, only to find out in the spirit world that it was a bad thing. That never happens. It's never happened to me, never happened to anybody I know. It just never happens. What happens is that when you learn how to do something on earth, so if you learn how to find truth while you're on earth, you'll be fine for the spirit world, And once you understand desire and passion and how that implicates, what you understand in the spirit world and on earth, get to the spirit world. I desire to learn something. Bang! The person who's ready to teach you, who already knows the thing's already there.
Convenient.
Yeah. It's wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful. Of course, if you're the first person in a location, which I've been a lot of times, you've got to learn to do all that for yourself. So this is why all of you know that I'm a very, I can do everything for myself. I don't need you to help me do it. Make sense? And when I say I don't need you to help me do it, I definitely want you to help me do it. Because, two people do a thing, it's faster, it's hopefully twice as fast as one person doing the thing, right? I definitely like that idea. Then you get what you want done twice as fast, hopefully. Yeah. But when it comes to needing a person or projecting at a person or needing all of everyone to agree with you, you've got to get rid of all that. You've got to learn to be self-responsible when it comes to all of your decisions and choices as well. And the way you do that is by firstly becoming self-responsible with the way you discover truth.
Thank you.
Vana? And then we'll come across to Max.
I was just wondering if you could share some examples of some experiments we could do with feeling emotions, like, yeah, I guess, yeah.
I think I don't want to get into that subject today,
Sure.
Ivana.
Yeah, no worries.
I think I've already said a lot about how to do those things.
Yep.
So my suggestion is to go back over that material and,
Yep.
but just, if you think about your core feelings, like sadness, a feeling you don't want to have, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So have you ever tried experimenting with sadness to see whether letting it go, like actually going through it, makes you feel better?
Yeah, I have.
So then why aren't you still doing it?
Because often I don't feel better. Yeah.
Yeah, so under those circumstances, then what I'll do is, okay, there were times when I felt better, and then there's other times when I don't. Why?
Yep.
Have you worked out why?
No. So I guess I could try to experiment more with that.
Why is it that sometimes I cry and I feel better,
Yep.
and it's permanently better,
Mm.
and then other times I cry and it's just like I'm crying again about the same thing, crying again about the same thing, and nothing gets better?
Yep.
So you need to make an experiment that tells you what's going on there. Now, I know what's going on, and what's going on is that you're in the addiction when you're crying the second time.
Mm.
So you're just crying about something that you lost and not something that you learnt. You understand the difference? There's a difference between crying because you didn't get a thing versus crying because you learnt a new thing and it's amazing. Or crying and you learnt a new thing and it made you regret all the old things. There's a different kind of crying there, right? One of them's healing and the other one's an addiction, not getting met. But you've got to experiment with that. I experiment with that, and I learned, you can cry for days and weeks and months on end, but if it's in an addiction, it's not going to benefit you at all.
Mm.
One time I did that, I cried for 8 weeks every day for about 5 hours, and at the end of the 8 weeks, I still felt the same. And I'm going, what the hell's going on? I'm crying, I'm letting it out, and then I realised I was crying based all on a false belief. Once I started looking at my beliefs about it, and I had some cries about my beliefs, bang, completely different. Didn't even need to cry any more about it. Does that make sense? So an example of that is I was crying, I was crying about a relationship. My feeling, it was with Mary, this one. I was crying about a relationship basically I felt ending. Mary didn't want to see me anymore, right? So crying about the relationship ending. So all I was really crying, it was about, I need her, I want her in my life, isn't it? I need her in my life. How are we going to move forward without being together? All this kind of thing. It's just crying in all of my addictions, right? Once I realised that I wasn't being loving in the entire thing myself, and that I needed to look at my beliefs and actually look at why, I felt this way, and I cried then sincerely about why I felt the way I did, that I needed somebody other than myself to live with, I needed somebody to make me feel good about myself and a lot of other things. Once I cried about that, all the addiction went away, and also I stopped crying. Make sense? So I experimented.
Yep.
By crying for 8 weeks and found that I had no results at all.
Yep.
And then I experimented with another way of dealing with it.
Yep.
And in the process of experimenting with the other way of dealing with it, I had a result. And interestingly enough, 2 days later, Mary gives me a call. It was so good she didn't give me a call in those 8 weeks. Because I would have just dumped all of those addictions on her. So my guides and God did a great thing keeping Mary away from me for those 8 weeks. Does that make sense? Well, at the time I thought that was the most terrible thing they could have done. But that's just an example of an experiment. If you, I've said many times with your emotion, if you keep crying about the same thing every day, you are not dealing with the thing. There's something else going on. There's beliefs that need to change. So you need to make experiments with what are your beliefs? What are the ones that you wholeheartedly believe are true, that are actually false. Right? Because you don't cry about a thing that's false forever unless you believe it's true.
Oh, hang on, my brain needs to catch up.
Yeah. Sorry.
Try that.
Tears are the result of false beliefs. Always. They're always the result of false beliefs. Now, I'm not talking about happy tears here, by the way, because they are, real, but I'm talking about sad tears are always the result of false beliefs. If you continue in the same tears all the time, then you're not releasing the false beliefs that cause those tears.
Yeah, and then that's why I wouldn't ever be feeling any better.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you need to find what false beliefs cause those tears. You're thinking it's one thing. So as an example is I was thinking that it was Mary leaving me. No, it wasn't. It had nothing to do with Mary leaving me. It had to do with my expectations of being loved. That were all false. Make sense? So on one hand, I thought it was one thing, but that wasn't the thing. But I could cry about it the rest of my life if I wanted to. But that wouldn't have helped because that thing wasn't the thing that I needed to release in order to stop crying, right? So you have to find the real thing. Yeah. And this is the point about, like, one of the methods of finding truth is through your experience. If you go through crying, you go through an emotion and it always seems never ending, then obviously something's wrong with the experience. Simple as that. So be honest with yourself, go, I'm doing something wrong here. I must be. It's not Jesus' fault, which is what you felt, right?
Have I? I didn't realise.
Yeah, you go, I don't want to listen to Divine Truth anymore because I'm sick of the cry. I'm sick of this, it's not working. How many of you had that spit, yeah? Many of you, right? You go, nah, it's not working. Yes, it's working, it's just the exact thing is actually working. And the exact thing is telling you what you're doing is actually wrong. It's working. It's telling you that it's had no effect, so therefore it must be wrong. That makes sense? But the average person goes, oh no, it's just not working. Because we want something that we believe to work, like should work. We want it to work. And this is where we're making an assumption. We're making an assumption, if I just keep doing this same thing, I'll get a different result.
Thank you.
Rather than going, oh, maybe my assumption is false. Make sense? Max, thanks.
I just wanted to clarify about beliefs. So last week you were talking about how our beliefs can influence our discovery of truth, and then today you're talking about assumptions. Is that the same thing? Or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they're pretty much your beliefs. You can see your beliefs are not established just in your mind, Max. So this is the thing we've got to get away from. Many of us sort of think that having a belief in my mind is what determines what I'll do next. It's not actually true. Your beliefs are connected to you emotionally. There's emotional reasons why you have them, right? So every assumption you have is really a false belief that is in you emotionally that then causes you to make a false assumption, right? So you could say assumptions are the effects of error-based emotions or error-based beliefs, error-based desires. They're all the things that are error-based are going to cause us to make presumptions that are also in error, and therefore make choices that then are also in error and to our own detriment. So I find this interesting because many of you sort of understand if you choose to do the wrong thing enough times, it hurts, right? You know that. But you still keep doing the wrong thing. So you've experimented, many of you have experimented enough with doing the wrong thing. You have. But you're very resistive to experimenting with doing the right thing. Why? It's because the addiction is telling you that it's the wrong thing. So an example of that is, somebody comes up and they say to you, Max, look, Max, I don't like you very much. And the addiction starts to come up going, oh, I need him to like me, right? So I'm going to try hard to get him to like me. So I'm going to tell him all the reasons why he should like me. I'll do some things, pander to him so that he comes to like me. And all of those things you'll choose to do will be in your addiction, right? All of them will be decided upon because of an addiction. Now, in that place, you're not going, he's allowed to not like me. I don't have to be liked by everybody. You're not doing that. You're going, I need to be liked by everybody. I need to be liked by him. I need to work for him. I need to, do something that's going to impress him, type of thing, Just like you would with your dad trying to impress him, right? Yeah. And in that place, you're making lots and lots of assumptions, including this assumption that it's a right to get him to like you is being made. So it's driven by a false belief. You don't need him to like you. You don't even need him to like you to be happy. You can be happy without anybody on earth liking you. So these are all assumptions we're making in that place, right? So very important to understand that many times we're taking actions that are based upon the assumptions that are based upon spiritual beliefs that we feel are true and that we must have, that are actually false and we don't need.
Yeah, I don't even feel I'm doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
I just feel I'm right.
That's right. In that place you're going to feel you're right. And this is where it's so easy to get caught up in the idea, I'm sure what I'm doing is right, and yet it's bringing me bad results. And my thoughts to you are, if it's bringing you some bad results, you've really got to contemplate whether, firstly, you are doing the right thing. Secondly, if you are very positive from God's perspective, you're doing the right thing, you can feel those rewards, then it's probably the right thing, and the people around you don't think it is. So hardly any of you are very impressed with me when I talk to you about your addictions, right? Most of you are just totally annoyed when I do it. You get pretty angry and crappy with me about it. Right. I know I'm doing the right thing, so too bad. All of your emotional responses are, I just feel like it's too bad, man. Like, you get angry, well, it's too bad. You could have been happy. You could have chosen to be happy. You could have chosen to see how bad that addiction is, but you didn't. Too bad. Like now, like I've told you, God's trying to tell you already through experience. Who else is going to tell you? Now, if you don't listen to the person who loves you and trying to tell you something, it's going to be hundreds of years before you learn it, because it's just going to be year after year after year of experience that's going to knock it into you. You know what I mean? It's much nicer if a guy can come along and tell you you're in an addiction and you actually believe him than it is to go 200 years having a bad experiences only to find out in the end that he was right. Make sense? So when I see you behave badly with me with regard to me sharing with you your addictions, I go, yeah, you're all bad behaved, we're all badly behaved. I don't think I'm badly behaved in that place. Do you know what I mean? If my intentions are right and my intentions are pure and my intentions are to love you and my intentions are to make your life easier, then I know I'm doing the right thing. Even if you think it's wrong. So this is where, if love's involved, it's easy for me to determine what the truth is. When you get angry and upset with me and don't want to see me for years and all that stuff, you're not being very loving to me, so I know you're wrong. Does that make sense to you? I don't treat you that way. Whenever you want to see me, I see you, right? I don't treat you that way. I don't sort of excommunicate you from my life for the rest of my existence just because you said something to me that I didn't like. And that, it might be different if you come up and punch me every day, then I'd be saying I'd stay away from you. But I don't do that with you, right? So why is it that people want to stay away and be angry? Well, I don't see it as my problem. It's not my problem. If I've been loving and my feelings towards a person remain loving, then there's no problem. Even if I've made a mistake, there's no problem. Even if I was wrong in what I said, there's no problem. Because I still love you. And you don't love me. So that's the lack of love is the problem. So, a lot of the things we choose to do and a lot of things we choose as truth are primarily the assumptions we're making because we think it's true. It's got nothing to do with reality. Make sense? And this particularly pertains to your interrelationships. God has truths about how love works. Most of you have no idea of those truths at all, of how love works. You don't even believe them to be truths. You believe them to be personal opinions. But you've got to remember that everything that God has designed, including how all of your emotions work, are all mathematical and predictable. Right? That means that every emotion you have has a mathematical cause, has a mathematical result. It's going to be the same, any person with the same emotion is going to have the same result. Right? If you really understand that, you can learn a lot and grow a lot, if you really get that. But when you start thinking, oh, it's just their opinion, my versus my opinion, you know, we're having fights all the time. Many of you come to God's way and you're still fighting with each other. What is going on? What's going on is you have not accepted the truth, and you have not accepted how truth is determined through love, not through fighting. Right? That all pertains to this, not understanding the methods to find the truth. Just because you believe something is true, it doesn't mean it is. Just because you were offended, it doesn't mean you should have been. Make sense? And in fact, if you were offended, you were definitely wrong. No matter what was said to you. There's no reason to take offence with anybody, if other than there being an emotion inside of yourself you're trying to prevent. Right? When you feel confident within yourself that you're doing the loving thing, and you know you are, and you can feel God's approval through what you do, when somebody tells you you're doing the wrong thing, it will have no effect on you whatsoever, and you certainly won't get offended from them. Nothing they say will offend you. Many of the things said to me are offensive to the average person. Like many of the things said to me every day would be offensive to most of you. But I don't feel offended. And the reason why is because I know the principles of truth. Very important thing to understand for your life, this. Now, the reason why I've laboured it so much here in this discussion is because last week I felt like we did have that discussion, remember, about truth, didn't we, in the first part of the day, right, in the morning. But I could feel for many of you, you're not understanding the ramifications of it in your life. You understand? So we can talk about how the soul is made and how we determine truth from a purely theoretical perspective. And I did last week. We did talk about it from a purely theoretical perspective. But at the end of the day, it's not going to benefit you until you really get in your heart, wow, this is so important for me, to understand this fundamental thing, because all of my life's happiness in the future is going to be determined by my ability to absorb truth as rapidly as possible. And all of my life's unhappiness is going to be caused by the error that I absorb instead. That's a very, very important thing to understand. If I am not understanding and practicing and putting into practice the methods to find truth, I am going to be very prone to discovering errors. And because I'm prone then for discovering errors, I am also going to be very, very prone to having pain and suffering. Because errors always cause pain and suffering. Always, without exception. Right? So unless I grasp this need, really, you could say it's a need for us to come to the concept of how do I learn? Really, that's what we're talking about here. How do I learn? And I'm saying, don't learn errors. Many times what you're currently doing is learning errors. That's not good for you. It's going to cause pain in the future. You want to learn truth, because that's going to bring you pleasure and happiness in the future. So this is the methods used to determine truth. Sense? Okay. We exhausted the questions on the subject, or no, Paul?
So does this come down to like a real desire for the truth, and because alternatively a desire for my truth and me to be right and the other wrong and things like that?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because when you have a desire for your truth, what you call your truth, which is no such thing. There's only God's truth, and then there's everything else. So God's truth is the only truth, and yours, either you have a part of God's truth and therefore you will know the truth, or you don't and you won't. It's as simple as that. There's no such thing as Paul has a truth independent to God. That's never going to happen. Never will happen. Never going to happen, right? But the average person is, and I just want to probably draw this on the board a bit in terms of the functioning or the things we go through in terms of our presumptions of happiness. Because it's very, very important to understand that most of us are driven to our error because we think those errors are going to bring us happiness. Do you understand? Yeah. So it's very important to understand this fundamental principle as to why we are prepared to believe that there is such a thing as my truth. Right? So if there was such a thing as Paul's truth, let's call it that, shall we? And all of the rest of you can substitute your own name in there, right? If there's such a thing as Paul's truth. What is the reality of that? Because there's a lot of realities it creates emotionally, sensorially, physically, sexually, spiritually, that you're not being conscious of. But it's important to analyse what those are. So what are the realities that Paul believes he knows the truth?
Well, what I want, like addictively, or what I want to tell myself.
What do you believe it's going to bring you?
Well, happiness.
Okay, you think Paul's truth equals happiness, right? Have you had that experience, Paul? How many times have you been happy?
Yeah, probably not much.
No, okay. So it's not true.
No.
Paul's truth doesn't bring you happiness. Most of us on earth have had that experience where we know that's true. But we still keep believing it. It's just like we're holding on to grim death about the belief that my truth must, at some point in the future, at some imagined time in the future, it's got to bring me the happiness that I desire. You know, we think, but our day-to-day life is evidence that that's not true. Right? You think of how many broken relationships, how many broken friendships, how many, the average person has quite a lot of them, right? So how many friendships are never really quite happy? How many of them are just based on, we like each other because we're doing the same thing, and all these kind of things? And there's so much of that going on where there's so much, you could call it dissatisfaction. But the average person thinks that if they just do more of the same thing, they'll get a more happy result. And yet it's not true. That's why most of us are unhappy on earth, because it's not true. What else do you think it's going to bring
you? Superiority.
Okay.
Being better than others.
Yeah, but you're not better than me, so. Right? Every time you're with me, you feel you're not. Now, I feel I'm equal to you, but you don't feel like you're equal to me. Every time we're together, you feel lesser, right? This is why you avoid my company a lot, right? So is it bringing you what you want? No. Holding on to Paul Street doesn't bring you what you want, just like me holding on mine wouldn't bring me what I want either, I must say, right? This applies to all of us. Yeah? What else do you think it's going to bring you?
I don't know.
You think it's going to bring you love? You think it's going to bring you sexual fulfillment? What else can I help you with more?
Status, perhaps.
Status, yeah, okay. What else?
Power, perhaps.
Power, okay, yeah. Okay. That's just a few. We could go on a lot. You know, the average person doesn't do a lot of self-analysis and see, this is what I believe my truth will bring me, you know, and then the average person never looks at their life goal and goes, has it brought me these things? Like, really, honestly, has it brought me these things? Right? You look at even the most arrogant, pig-headed people in the world with the most power they only believe their truth. Someone like Trump sort of comes to mind because he's very much like that. He's got a lot of bad things going on in his life. He's quite unhealthy. You know, there's a lot of bad things going on in his life. Not many people are happy with him, understandably. You know, he causes a lot of friction amongst people. He's triggered some wars. Lots of people have died because of him and his truth. The results aren't very good. Right? So the average person does believe this, right? Does believe it. But the evidence in their life is completely the opposite. Right? So what's the problem? Can you see what the problem must be? The problem must be that Paul believes in this fiction. It's a story that this is going to happen. You believe the fiction. And almost everybody you meet believes these fictions, right, on earth. Usually these fictions only die away once a person starts progressing in the spirit world, you know, where they get to that, you know, because it's very confronting when you get to the spirit world when you believe these things, because you arrive in the hills and you think you should arrive in heaven, if you're arriving anywhere. You think you're great, so you should be rewarded, right? So it's a huge confrontation of reality. This is a fiction, a unreality. It's not true, it's not real, it's never going to be, because there's no such thing as Paul's truth. And the trouble is, when I believe there is such a thing as my truth, I'm basically saying that there is a thing that's real that from God's perspective isn't even real. Right? So my very foundation for then living becomes this, what I believe is real, and the whole lot of it is not real. Can you see the problem? Yeah. So when we're driven into holding on to what we call our truths, it's because we think that these things, and I must say many, many other things, are going to come from that. We believe there's going to be positive benefits to our holding on to our truth. Even though the evidence in our lives is against that belief. It's already proving to us to a large degree that that belief isn't true, right? And yet we still want to hold on and believe. That's what I call a stubborn person. Make sense? You're a very stubborn person. But I must say, join the club. Right? So because you know, the issue is that many of us want to hold on to this sort of concept that what I think is real, right? Not on God determines my reality. No, that's not the way we're thinking. We're saying I determine my reality. So functionally, it's the very first injury that was ever presented, you know, that ever was created by humans, which was, I am God, I determine reality. And God's going, you silly boy. No, you don't determine reality. You know, God's laws and God's creation, God is the only real thing, the real soul. Everything else is a created being, you know, so therefore God determines reality. God created the laws. Those laws determine your reality. God created you. God determines whether you exist or not. God creates your reality. He's done that right from the beginning of any of the universe ever being created. It's all begun with the idea that God actually created the reality of it. And us clever people, we go, oh, there's no such thing. We even get to the stage where we philosophise and start saying, oh, there's no such thing as reality. We're really just living in some kind of, computer simulation. There's always philosophical things that go on about all that stuff, And isn't it so wonderful? I'm so clever coming up with that idea, And so, and all of it's just so much crap, and then you can understand why, because it is so untrue, and it's causing lots of pain and suffering. And at some stage, we've got to join the link between our own truth and pain and suffering. And we're not. We're sort of going, all I've got to do somehow is get to know a bit more of God's truth without thinking, no, what I've really got to do is give up all my own truth. Make sense? The average person's not thinking that when they hear truth. They go, oh yeah, I need to learn more of God's truth. And I'll go, there's only God's truth. There's not more of God's truth. There's only God's truth. And what you've got to do is learn to give up everything you think you believe, everything you think you know, everything you think you understand, everything. You've got to give all that up for the sake of learning what God's truth is. That's got to be done for you to be happy. It makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because if God created you, he knows what's going to make you happy. If God created the very emotions that you can have to be happy, then he must know how they work. If God created the laws that even cause your soul to feel emotion, then he must know how that emotion flows. He must know all that, right? If God created the ability for you to understand what different inflections of emotion is, then he must know what causes those emotions to flow. He must know all that. So what's the point of me knowing anything except God's reality? No point, right? Really. And this is why we've got to get to the stage where we go, okay, the only reason why I'm holding on to this concept, like I've shown up there, of my own truth, Paul's truth, my own truth, the only reason why I'm holding on to it is because I believe that it's going to bring me those things that I think are going to be good for me. And some of those things are not even good for me. Like superiority is not good for you. It really isn't. Like every time there's someone who feels superior, there's always someone who feels inferior. Right? If we all felt equal, we didn't have that. And therefore we'd all be like, we would all not know what it feels like to be looked down upon. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Yes. Like imagine growing up in an environment where you've never been looked down upon in your entire existence and you don't even know what that feels like. Wouldn't that be great? Like, that'd be like blissful, wouldn't it? To know that. And what about the freedom that would give me? Like I'd be able to just go and do this and nobody's going to condemn me for it, and I'll go and do that and nobody will condemn me for it. Nobody will feel that better than me. I'll go and do this, go and do that, experiment here, experiment there. Nobody's going to condemn me for anything that I do. And I don't mean in like I go and murder or anything like that. I mean, I would be very conscious of the fact that I wouldn't want to feel superior to somebody enough to even murder them, to even demand anything from them. If even that would require me to feel superior, right? So there would be no murder, there would be no rape, there would be no potential pain and suffering from just condescension or ridicule. You wouldn't even ridicule anybody, right? All you would do is just present truths and that's it, and give people the opportunity to learn. But when you feel like you're equal to somebody, you're not going, I'm not going to, they're not worth my attention. They're not worth my spending a bit of time with or anything like that. You wouldn't feel any of those things, right? So that one emotion is not going to bring you happiness or anybody else actually, right? But you often think it is. And that's because we're unprepared to feel why that desire for that emotion was there in the first place, the error-based emotion. But in some of these other things, like I want sexual fulfillment, but Paul's way is not going to get it. Right? It hasn't got it so far, so how is it going to ever get it? I want happiness, but Paul's way is not going to get it. So give up the idea it is. It's not. It can't, because it's not God's truth. So it can't bring the thing. The only thing that can bring the happiness that you're seeking is the truth of how you were designed to work, how your emotions work, all those kind of things. And all of those things come from God, not from you. And that's why it's so important to just give up the idea that you're right any other time, pretty much. Right? And just the key thing is to give up the idea of even worth being associated with what is right. You've got to get to the stage where all you want is God's truth and that alone. Knowing that that's the thing that's going to bring you happiness, it's going to bring you love, it's going to bring you sexual fulfillment, it's going to bring you potentially even status, even though you won't want it. Right? Potentially power too, because you'll be living in harmony with love, and that is the power of the universe. So naturally, when you're living in harmony with it, you're going to have more power than you currently do. Make sense? So the only reason why I would say stay addicted to my own truth is because I believe it's going to bring me these things that I think I'm seeking, and I'm in error in that concept. To believe such a thing is just believing a lie. Never going to happen. Yeah, the only thing we can do here is go, right, what's going to bring me those things? I'm going to have to give up some things that I think are good, because God knows they're not good for me, and that's part of God's truth too. Right? So God's truth is going to bring me happiness, love, sexual fulfillment, power even, but not the kind of power that you might be seeking now, but it will bring you power. But it won't bring you status. Like status is it might bring you honour where people respect you, certainly. It won't bring you status. It's not going to bring you superiority either, because you'll learn, the more and more you practice it, the more you'll learn you're not superior to anybody. Yeah. So at some point, the main reason why we make the decision to reject God's truth in favour of our own is because we sincerely believe that our own truth is the thing that's going to bring us the results of happiness that we're seeking. And that fundamental belief is an illusion. And that is something we need to change. Now, what I notice is that almost everybody we meet, and everybody I've ever seen on earth, has that illusion. And it comes from the God illusion. It comes from the belief I'm a God, I can determine the facts. I'm sorry, that's not true. You're never going to be a God who determines the facts. You'll never be a God for that reason, because God is the God who determines the facts. Your Creator determines the facts. Your Creator made the laws, she determines the facts. That's always how it's always going to be. She's determined the facts. She created the universe in which you reside. She created the body in which you reside here on earth. She created the spirit body you have. She created the soul you have. She created the fact that you're half of the soul. She created all the laws that govern all of the operations of all that. She knows the facts. All the facts are hers. They're not yours. All you can do is choose to either reject them or accept them. That's all you can choose. You either choose to accept the facts as God has designed them, or you attempt to reject the reality of those facts. That's all you can choose to do. But when you reject the reality of those facts in favour of your lies, Because fundamentally, you could say when we write down Paul's truth, we should have written down Paul's lies. Right? That's what we should have wrote. Because that's what they are. You know, the majority are only truths if they're in agreements with God's. That's the only time they were truths. So a lot of them weren't in agreement with God, so therefore they were lies. So we should have, when we call it my truth, we should really be calling it my lies. The lies I tell myself, hoping that they're true, you know. And we need to give up that as a concept. And this a very important part of learning humility is learning that fact. Learning that actually truth is not I don't own it. All I can do is obtain it through transference from God to me. That's all I can do. I don't own it. It can live in me once it's been transferred from God to me. The truth can live in me. Right? And that's why in the first century I said I'm the way, the truth and the life, because the truth was living in me. That makes sense, Paul? The truth itself was living in me, and so I could say, I am the truth, because the truth is living in me. But I didn't say I was the owner of it. The owner of it is God, and all I can do is have it within me, get it within me. Make sense? Yeah. Yeah. So you've got to stop telling yourself the fiction. You've got to stop telling yourself the lie that you can determine what the truth is. You can't. You won't ever be able to do it. It will never happen. Why would you even think it would happen? Well, the only reason why you would even think that is because you've bought off the lie that you're a God. And you're acting upon it. Make sense? And you're not. You're a human. You're a created human. You're always going to be human unless you receive, by transference, from God, something other than human. That's the only way you're not going to be a human. The rest, if you don't do that, you will always be a human. You'll never be a God. There's never going to be a divine spark in you until that happens, until you receive something from God that is divine, that can enter you, and then you'll have a divine spark within you then. But until then, you won't. You'll only be you, a human, just the same as every other human, with varying degrees of intellect, varying degrees of knowledge, varying degrees of experience, varying degrees of emotion, but you'll still be human. Always. Nico? Oh, sorry.
So, is it correct to say that my happiness, if I'd have any, that's all dependent on God?
Your happiness that you've had up until now has really only come to you from two sources, one of which is an illusion, and the other of which is real.
Yeah.
The two sources are you're in your addictions and you think that causes happiness, but you're not looking at the full equation because you're not seeing all the pain and suffering you're causing yourself and others in your addiction. So all you're doing is you're going, I'm in this frenzy and I get the thing I want right now, but you're not seeing all the pain and suffering it's going to cause you in your future, pain and suffering that causes other people now and in the future. You're not seeing all the detrimental effects it's having. So you're basically going, as long as I don't see what's going on really, I can be happy with that addiction. So it's like any addiction, whether it's physical, like coffee or something like that, or spiritual or sexual, whatever the addictions are, you're just living in the illusion that it's bringing you the thing you think it's bringing you when it actually isn't, right? So there's the illusion of happiness, right? And the addictions bring you the illusion of happiness. So there are things you love that you think are going to bring happiness to you, while they're absolutely destroying and shattering your life, is what they're doing, right? So that's one side of the equation. The other side is the only thing that can bring you happiness, which is God's truth. That's the only thing that can bring you real happiness, and at the same time bring you happiness while it's bringing everybody else happiness. Right? It's the only thing that can do that. So at some point you've got to come to that conclusion. God's truth is the only way I'm going to be happy. So why would I not put it as a priority to seek in my life if it's the only thing that's going to bring me happiness? You can see, quite often I say to people, you should be concerned about happiness. You should. God designed you to be happy. He wants you to be happy. You should be concerned about it. But the only way you're going to get it is by accepting God's truth. There's no other way you're going to get it. Makes sense, thank you? Good.
Can you have transferred truth from God without receiving divine love?
Yes, of course. Yes.
And
Every six-sphere spirit is in the condition where they've had some truths from God that they've now transferred, that are a part of their very soul, and they live in those truths every single day, but they've not received any of God's love. Yep. Yep. Of course, beyond the sixth sphere, completely impossible. You cannot get to the seventh sphere without having received some of God's love. And so therefore, everything that is the truth of how the seventh sphere works, you're not going to understand unless you receive God's love. So that you get to a point, the human, the normal human, gets to a point of saturation where they've assimilated all the truths they possibly can about the universe, about God, about themselves and other things like that, without receiving God's love. And then there's a limit to the intellect, and there's a limit to the reality of it, because they're not able to receive any more without receiving God's love. Makes sense for me? And that's the design of it. The design of it is such that you're going to remain a human with the human limitations unless you receive part of the divine, because the things above the sixth sphere can only be understood by the divine. And unless you become a part of the divine, you will not understand any of them. You'll think you do. Just like you can think here on earth in the first sphere that you understand some things and you really don't. You can think a lot of things, but it doesn't make it real. Right? The only way it's going to become real is by receiving some of the divine. Then you will know the reality of it. Make sense?
so when I'm saying God's divine truth, am I saying that the right way, or just say God's truth?
Well, God, when we say divine truth, which is what we talk about, we're really saying God's truth. It's the same thing, isn't it?
Same thing.
Yeah, we're really saying that the divinity is only in the fact that it's God's, and it is all God's truth. Like, it's funny when we talk about divine truth on earth. The average person thinks, "Oh, we're talking about a sort of certain area of life." And that's called God's truth. No. We're saying there's not a single thing that can happen to you in any experience that isn't a part of God's truth. God's truth affects absolutely everything, right down to the infinitesimally small particles that govern your very being. They're all part of God's truth. You understand? There's not a single thing separate from it. You can create the illusion you're separate by calling it your truth. But you're not. You're living still in harmony. The laws are still having the force upon you that they're going to have. And it's all determined by God, and none of it's determined by you. All you can do is choose to live in harmony or out. And out is an illusion, because you're still not out. You understand? It's like, I think I'm a God creating my own laws. No, you haven't created a single law. You haven't. God's going to destroy they're temporary. God's going to destroy every one of them, so that you haven't really created one. Even your creations of sin are temporary. Right? They are realities that you create, but they are temporary, so therefore they're not existing in the infinite. They're gone, they come and go, based upon your acceptance of truth, God's truth or not. Right? So God's truth determines absolutely everything, and it's so important to understand that. And we can't have a conversation about all these other things, even the introductory things of what God's truth is about, how the human soul is made, how the body is made, spirit body, how the spirit world works, and all these other things. We can't cover a single subject that has ever been presented or ever will be presented without understanding some fundamental facts about the fact that it all comes from God. It's all God's truth. And there's many people in the spirit world, even in the sixth sphere, are in this illusion that they somehow came up with a fancy truth, of their own. And no, it's a lie. It can only be called their lies. Unless it's in harmony with God's truth, it's their lies. And you're allowed to have lies even in the 6D. You are. Many of them live in the complete lie about the nature of God. Right? You're allowed to have them because you're allowed to choose them. You can be a perfectly loving person while at the same time choosing lies. It's much harder, I must say. But you can. There are 6 sphere spirits who are human still, who are in that state where they still choose the lies about God. They're still in that place where they're choosing the lie. God doesn't say to them, oh, you're not allowed to be happy to a certain degree, to the human degree possible. Because that's what you have in the 6th sphere. You have the happiness of the human to the most degree. That's the limit of your happiness. It's the limit of everything. It's the limit of knowledge, limit of happiness, limit of experience, limit of fulfillment, limit of everything is there because it's the human limitations. Remember last week we talked about the human limitations. God created us all with human limitations and we can only exceed them by receiving part of the divine. So 6th sphere is the human limitations of happiness. They still think they're pretty happy. And what God decided for the human happiness to be far exceeds what we have here on earth. What we have on earth is misery. On earth it's basically human misery. Right? And when you compare that with what they have in the 6th sphere, which is human happiness, there's a huge, huge discrepancy between those two places. As you will all find out at some point in your future when you visit the two places, right? You'll see the discrepancy. But that's not the same as really God's happiness. God's happiness is only possible by receiving a part of God to experience that. And it far exceeds anything human can imagine. Just like everything that you receive from God can far exceed everything you can imagine. Even the truth you receive from God will far exceed what you even imagine. Sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Isabella?
So if I'm acting in my life, how do I make experiments? Because they will go probably wrong.
Well, yeah, and that's a good thing.
Okay.
See, many of you go, oh, but if I make experiences in my lives, then that would create some pain and suffering, and that'll be bad, so I can't do it. And so the better thing to do is to not take any action at all. And I go, no, that's not true. You're better off acting in your lives and seeing the results and seeing that it's bad and going, well, so it was bad. And then you at least know that. You'll at least know that acting in your lies, acting in what you believe to be truth was a lie, and you at least know that because it caused your unhappiness. You'll at least know that. That'll be good for you because you won't do it again. Right? But many of you go, oh, I want to live in the illusion that it's not bad. Firstly, many of us do that. So we keep doing the same thing over and over again, hoping that it won't be bad, and it always ends up bad. And we keep trying again, hoping in the same way, hoping that we're going to get a different result, which is, I think, the definition of stupidity in a lot of ways, isn't it? And so we keep doing that. But then, on the other hand, we also do this other thing, which is that, now that I've been hurt so much by the lies that I acted upon in the past and experimented with in the past, now what I should do is not act at all. And that's another lie, because all that does is cause pain and suffering too. So God's trying to stop you from doing things that cause you pain and suffering. One of the things that cause you pain and suffering is not doing anything at all. And the average person going, but if I do nothing at all, then I won't feel anything bad. And that's not true. If you do nothing at all, there's going to be a lot of bad things you feel, which many of you have evidence of, right, already. You know that you could have taken action, you didn't, and you're trying to keep it safe, and nothing happened, 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 and eventually you have the pain of nothing happening. So that's pain too. And God's going, don't go down that track, silly girl. He's saying, take some actions, Whatever they are, you'll learn whether they're good or bad, and in the process of them being happy experiences, then you can experiment more and see whether they are truly happy or not. But measure it. Don't just live in the illusion that it's good when it's not, but also don't do nothing, because that's just going to result in nothing, which is also not good. Yeah. So God's not giving you a choice to opt out, which is great. Because if you could opt out, most of you would have already, right? Yeah, you think about the pain you've been in at different times of your life, and you go, oh, it made me sad. Most of you would have opted out. If you could have a permanent way of opting out, where you could just opt out, like suicide, and there'd be no consequence, many of you would have chosen it, right? So, you know, it's great. There were many people who chose suicide, and they were hoping to opt out, and they found out very, very quickly in the spirit world that not only could they not opt out, but now they had more pain for the desire to opt out. So God made the rules. One of them is you can't opt out. Silly people, why would you think you could? You know what I mean? That's how God sort of is like. Why would you think I would make a system where you can opt out? You know? If it's a loving system, you're not opting out. You've got to make a definite choice to be out of harmony with love, and even then, you can't opt out. There's going to be results from that. You know, I go, oh, you know, I made a mistake, so now I don't want to feel the consequences. So can I just opt out from the consequences? This is what causes the idea of suicide, right? It's the idea that I had some mistakes in my life. They're painful, so now I want to opt out from the pain that I've caused. Yeah, not possible. Not possible. Never going to be possible. Yeah, God made the rules. Great rules. Even though we don't think at times that they are, right? Yeah. So it's very important that we grasp these fundamental principles of truth, right? And because if we can grasp them, we need to get them into our heart, really, isn't it? That's the key thing. Because if we get them there, then we can go, all right, now when we come to talk about a subject such as what I want to talk about next, which is the universe itself, now I can put it into action the principles of how to discover the truth in this scenario. Yeah. So the things I'm sharing with you are not things that I'm just dreaming up in my mind and then coming up with an idea and think, that's great. That's a utopian logical thing. They are things that I've had to accept from God that I now am prepared to share with you. Right? That's what they are. They're not just imaginings of my own that I've had a brilliant mind, which I don't have, I must say, and I had a brilliant mind and I come up with all these wonderful ideas. All of which are utopian dreams that you'll never experience a reality of. Right? It's not like that at all. And it won't be like that for you either. And when you discover truth and you really feel it, you'll know for certain. Once you know for certain, reality experience creates a reality. You don't need faith anymore. You know for certainty the thing. And this is important to understand. So when we present divine truth, I'm not saying to you, oh, this is just an idea. This is just something that you can accept or not accept. You are allowed to think you're accepting or not accepting. Sure. But it's too bad, because you're going to be accepting it at some point. That's how it is. It's God's truth. Sooner or later, you're going to have to accept it. You want to get anywhere in the spirit world, you're going to have to accept it. Right? You want to have any happiness, you're going to have to accept it. And to be honest with you, it's fantastic. So why wouldn't you want to accept it? It doesn't make any sense to not accept something that's fantastic. Yeah. And when I say fantastic, that word is probably not the right word, because it's based upon the word fantasy, right? And it's not a fantasy. It's a reality. Right? Realistic. Realistically fantastic. Something like that. Yeah. Pauline?
So if humility is like a doorway to truth,
Mm-hmm.
and truth is a doorway to love,
Mhm.
divine love. If you, yeah.
Mhm.
So what it stops, if you're a sixth sphere, you stop because you don't have the desire to find and have a relationship with God. Is
Yeah,
that
you,
what it
you
is?
could say you've had to have enough humility to reach the point where you've gotten rid of your sin,
Mhm.
right? But you don't have enough humility when it comes to your relationship with God, right? Otherwise, you would want to keep learning, wouldn't you?
So that relates to a desire to know and want that.
Yeah, but also, why would you not desire to know and want that? It doesn't make any logical sense to not want to know about God.
Well, why have we so many sixth sphere people?
That's right. Why? I don't understand. I've told you many times there's many things I don't understand. One of the things I don't understand is why, if a person is offered a relationship with God, why they wouldn't take it. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. If you read my comments in the Paget messages, you will see it doesn't make any sense to me. I've said this many times there as well. I don't get it. I don't understand why people would not want the relationship if it was offered. You know, I can understand them not having it because it's not offered. Because you remember, it's a gift God's offering, and if God hasn't offered it, well, you can't get it then. So I understand under those circumstances why you would not have it. But when it is offered, why would you not want it? Right? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's completely illogical. Right? I understand though why a person may be illogical. There's all sorts of reasons why you might choose to be illogical, and many of them is because you don't honour love, you don't honour your senses, you don't honour your emotions, you don't honour your experience. There's all sorts of reasons why you choose to be illogical. But in terms of if something is offered and you know about it, why wouldn't you take it? Well, that's just strange.
Yeah, because the sixth sphere spirits are logical.
No,
Except for that.
no, they're not logical.
Well,
They are human logical,
yeah,
which is not the same as God logical.
yeah.
You know, this is the thing you got to remember: human anything, human love, human logic, human truth, human satisfaction. All of it's a very big limitation compared to God satisfaction, God love, God logic. You understand that you can't even compare the two. The two are like comparing. You know, it's like comparing an ant with a mountain. You know what I mean? It's like one's even potentially transient, and the other one is permanent, established, infinite, like constant, never wavering. You know, human love. You look at human love. Like people say, oh, if we all loved, then there'd be, just human love. I mean, there'd be all the problems of the world would be solved. I don't think so. Because human love is fickle. One day somebody loves something and the next day they don't. Right? So God's love is not fickle. God's constant with her love, not fickle. It's the same with God's truth, like human truth. But one day Paul has a feeling about one thing and the next day he changes his mind. So do all of you, right? All of you, we had up there Paul's truth or my truth or whatever. This is what you do with your truth. Your truth is fickle. One day you change, the next day you change your mind, next day you change your mind, next day you change your mind. It's not truth. It's just an illusion, right? God's truth never changes its mind, ever. It's always the same, the whole time. It never changes. It's unchangeable. How great is that? Once you learn it, you never have to unlearn it. With my truth or Paul's truth or whoever else's truth, you learn it and then you're going to have to unlearn it because it wasn't God's truth, right? So you've got to go through two processes now. You learn it thinking it would be happy. You're not happy. You realise you're not happy. Then you've got to unlearn it, and that makes you unhappy too because now there's nothing. Now you don't know anything at all, and you have to realise that. So that's unhappy too. And then you get to the stage where you're humble enough to have that cry and go through that emotionally, and then you realise I know nothing at all. Where do I find the truth? And I still don't have a relationship with God, so I still don't know where to find the truth. So, it's so sad, right, that happens because we could just be really honest with ourselves and go, whoever created us knows the truth. Period. I know next to nothing. Period. Right? And while you have that view, you're now going to be open to receiving truth.